Welcome to ComSpark. Today we're in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm Pam Robertson, and I'll be your guest host. And today we have Mitch Greenfield from Humana.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome, Mitch. By industry measures, Humana is quite mature when it comes to cloud initiatives and adoption. What advice would you give other businesses that are beginning their cloud journey?
That's a great question. We've really been at the cloud for a while, probably about 6 years. So I think we've learned a lot, and the cloud's really matured over that time too. I think probably the number one biggest advice I would give is be thoughtful up front. There's a lot of setup, and it doesn't seem that way because it's the cloud providers want you to think you can just jump right in, but there's a lot of setup and mindfulness that needs to come into things like tagging and VNet setups or VLANs or however you want to think about networks. There's a lot to really be mindful of up front. And then as a security person, I would say don't give away the keys to the kingdom to developers too early. Okay. If they get full admin rights, you kind of lose control of those virtual networks very quickly. So just having a little more mindful way to go into it. I know one big initiative for us recently has been everything has release pipelines. So whenever code is being deployed to a cloud environment, ensuring that it is coming from a certified pipe. Mm-hmm. So not someone that's just logging into a server or into a CLI and jamming at the keyboard to get it done. Mm-hmm. That's really going through a process. And the benefit there is twofold. Security, obviously, but then also you end up with a product that is usable and can be redeployed over and over. And sometimes is even portable across cloud. So it can be something that you're deploying in AWS and your business decides to pivot to Azure. If you're using release pipelines, maybe Terraform templates or something like that, you can very quickly pivot to another cloud platform. So those would probably be my biggest advice up front to ensuring that you're on to a good start.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, that's good advice. Thank you. What are 3 challenges has Humana had to overcome regarding cloud and the security?
Yeah, that's great. So the number one I'll go with is talent and skill. And that's really a challenge, I think, for everyone in the industry. I don't think that's unique to security even. I think while security is its own talent and skill and its own skill deficiencies right now, I think everyone's retooling and relearning for the cloud, across IT. So I think that's probably been our biggest challenge. And then 2 is breaking old ways of doing things. So at Humana, we have one of our values is rethink routine. And we're kind of constantly trying to reinvent how we operate, how we run IT essentially and service our members and customers. And the cloud, I think, has forced a lot of that thinking. So, I'll give an example. When servers get built, sometimes they're not as patched as they could be. In the cloud, we're not letting that happen. Everything is being patched, prior to any release, and it's all part of the pipeline. And so I think that's one example of kind of rethinking routine, as we like to call it, of just get it right from the get-go. Don't let things get out of control. So those are two big learnings about security. I think the third is that security can actually be better in the cloud.
Oh, really?
And I think that kind of is something that comes as a shock to a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
So the cloud providers operate, and all of them have a similar mindset of a shared security model. So that means they're doing some of the work, you're doing some of the work. So really understanding where those lines are is really important, because now some of the things that you were previously accustomed to, like physical security, are now someone else's responsibility. So you really can hone in on securing the application, securing the code, and the environments. If you think about containers, containers can be way more secure than a virtual server because they're very limited in scope, right, of what's running on there. So I think that's one example of cloud being more secure. I think the other example is the barriers to creating multiple networks is much lower. So I know Amazon likes to use the term blast radius and reducing your blast radius. So a lot of environments suffer from flat networks. They've grown over time, and they've just added more servers and sprawl. So I think in a virtual environment, you really can increase security by creating all those virtual boundaries. And that's been really big for us to think about how we split up rights, because now we're splitting up permissions, you're splitting up firewall rights, you're kind of honing in and giving an application just what it needs to be successful. So those are probably 3 of the biggest things that I think can really, that we've really had to focus on, and it can really change the cloud.
Sure. And just about anybody would have to focus on those, large and small, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and I think it just has become more obvious over the years. I think even some organizations, when they started with AWS, because AWS was the first to market pretty much, had one account.
Right.
And they realize that like one account doesn't scale, doesn't give you the boundaries you need. So I think pretty much that's become a best practice. Azure calls them subscriptions, same idea,
Right.
but kind of create those virtual boundaries and really use those to your advantage. And doing that in your traditional data center, it's really hard to create that same thing. I mean, I know everyone wants the zero trust is the buzzword,
Yeah.
maybe the buzzword of the year, but cloud can really help you accelerate that.
Right. Well, good. That's great. And also in your role, you're in R&D in cybersecurity. So what is one area that you find most exciting or cutting edge, like what's coming down the pike, so to speak?
That's a great question. I think where identity is going.
Really?
So identity continues to be probably the biggest challenge everyone faces.
Identity management?
Or just everything around identity.
Okay.
Because, there's so much leaked credentials on the internet. There's so much fraud around stolen identities. But I think it's one area where the industry is really coming together and trying to mature in a way that is moving us away from passwords. So maybe we'll see the end of passwords soon. I know like the FIDO2 standard and the FIDO Alliance, Microsoft's behind it, Google's behind it, and many others is really picking up a lot of momentum in the industry. And you've got some other small players that are coming in and trying to really get away from passwords and really move to, a lot of it's based on certificates. So you still have a root of identity,
right.
But it's really trying to move away from that. I think the other area that I've been seeing a lot is how we move away from network-based controls to identity-based controls. Like with the whole topic of cloud, securing, a firewall and even thinking about your workforce and how they access applications has completely flipped. So I know one of our business goals is any device, anytime, anywhere.
Right.
Really hard to deliver, especially in a highly regulated industry. But kind of looking at technologies that enable that vision of mass productivity. I was talking to one of my coworkers this week, and I had someone new start on my team, and I was like, okay, give me your phone. And we sat down. It was actually pretty funny. I just kept clicking the button and kept stealing his face and installing app after app after app. But I mean, it was really about how he became mobile productive. And by the time we were done the next morning, which was this morning, he was like, man, that's awesome, right? I've got everything I need. It's like, I don't really even need a laptop.
Right.
Because, we went through and installed a half dozen apps that enabled his productivity. So I think as we get there, getting to a place where everything's more secure because identity is more trusted. And then those outliers are those outliers. I know one big area of focus for us has been how we mature multi-factor. So multi-factor is always a challenging user experience, but thinking about ways to ensure that we're only in front of a user when we need to be. So if you're in the same, on the same computer, same time of day, same everything, maybe we don't need a multi-factor you. Really use all the
But
conditions.
if you're highly mobile, you might need one.
You might see it more often. So it's always kind of there, and it's always using algorithms and data to drive risk. So you have a continuously changing risk score. As that risk score increases, your odds of seeing multi-factor increase. If your risk score remains low, then your odds of seeing multi-factor
Which
remain
can be
low.
challenging when you have so many different types of users as you do within your organization. Anyway, well, thank you, Mitch, for being here today. This has been very great information that I'm sure everybody will enjoy hearing about. And if you would like to see more, you can visit comspark.tech. And thank you.
Thanks.